Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second class of the beginner's Talmud. I passed around a few of the notes here. We have a few students coming in over here, online and live. There you go. We're just going to recap a little bit what we did last week. And the first class was, what is the Talmud? That was the first question. What is it? And we explained that there are basically 5 pillars to what is the Talmud. So we said the first thing of the Talmud is the translation of the Torah as it was given over to us by the oral tradition. Second pillar was there were other matters which are not translations, but different laws which were passed down from Moses at Sinai, like, for instance, the measurements, the size, the minimum size for a sukkah. What is the size of an etrog? What size does a room have to be in order to have a mezuzah? All these kind of Torah. There's a lot of things with measurements, and those measurements were also passed down from Moses at Sinai. That was number 2. Number 3 was the rules of
major to
minor, major, minor. This is the extrapolation, to take ideas which already exist in the Torah and to see how we can sort of compare one case to the other and bring laws which apply in one case and apply it to another case. This is the laws of the deduction and extrapolation. You can call it that. We take different ideas which exist within the Torah, different principles, and we apply it to other principles of the Torah. Now we see something, like I said, we see something by Shabbos. We say, oh, if this applies to Shabbos, it must also apply to Yom Kippur, which is the Sabbath of Sabbaths. Right? Or if you have something, let's say, something which applies to a leniency that applies to a major law, for sure that leniency should apply also to a minor law. Those are laws of deduction and extrapolation. That's the third principle of what the oral tradition is, of the Mishnah, the Talmud is about. And then we had rabbinical law. And we said that within the Torah itself, the rabbis were given certain powers. It's not their own powers. They didn't make up those powers. Those powers are granted to them in the Torah. The Torah says, and it'll be a case where you don't know what to do, you shall go to the rabbis of your generation and you shall listen to them. And it speaks about, so there are 2 categories within rabbinical law. One is fences around the Torah to protect the Torah. So like the Torah says, you shall create a parapet around your roof so that no one shall fall off. Same way as certain laws where the rabbis were afraid that people might break laws, so they put in other, like, fences. An example of that would be, let's say, laws of muktzah on Shabbos, where it says you're not allowed to touch a pen because unless you might come to write on Shabbos, since you're not supposed to write on Shabbos. So the rabbi said, not just can't you write on Shabbos, but you shouldn't use the instrument, right? You're not supposed to start a fire on Shabbos, so don't use the don't touch a candle or the matches, right? So those are the fences around the Torah. And the 5th one is rabbinical establishments. They have the right to create different establishments. So different holidays like Hanukkah and Purim, things like building an Eruv, things like laws, rabbinical laws like lighting Shabbos candles, which is a rabbinical law, which was established by the rabbis, etc., etc. So there are the 5 aspects of that are included in the Talmud. The 5 pillars. I call it the 5 pillars of the Talmud. So that's what we discussed at great length last week. And this week we're going to speak a little bit about how the Talmud and the Mishnah was developed. Okay, as we said, a lot of it started in the oral tradition, was passed down to Moses at Sinai. But what happened from generation to generation? A little bit what the history is, and how the laws developed over the years by the Jewish people, and how they were recorded in the Mishnah and the Talmud, and then thereafter, how halacha, which is Jewish law, was developed over a period of a few thousand years. So how did all these laws that we have today, where did they all come from? And I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm going to start from the start. We're going to start from Moses at Sinai. Moses went up. Moses was told by God that he's about to give the Jewish people, he's going to give them on Mount Sinai, he's going to give them the Ten Commandments. So Moses gathered all the Jews around the mountain, and God started teaching the Torah, what was known as 10 Commandments, not the 613, 10 biggies that God said, the 10, like David Letterman's top 10, right? So the top 10 that was said, right? You guys are following me? Can you guys hear me online? And by the way, can you hear me? Thumbs up. Okay, because I thought you'd laugh at the joke about David Letterman's top 10, but whatever. You don't have to laugh. It's fine. It's okay. Okay, good. Very good. So we start with the top 10. First bit of the Torah that's taught to the Jewish people is at Mount Sinai, and it's taught directly by God. Then God commands Moses. Okay, this happened on Shavuot when the Torah was given. And the people heard the 10 Commandments on Shavuot 3,335 years ago. And then God tells Moses, come up on the mountain, I have a lot to teach you. And he goes up there for 40 days and 40 nights. And over there, he's taught the Torah. And now there's questions whether he was taught the whole Torah, whether he was taught the principles. But he was up for 40 days and 40 nights. And the tradition is that he was taught the Torah in that period of time over the 40 to 49. So he was given the written law and the oral tradition. That means that what we said before, that God gave together with the written law, he also gave explanations. He explained when he said phylacteries in the Torah, what are the phylacteries? It doesn't say what they are, right? So Moses was showed by God, look, these black boxes, you take 4 parchments, you put them in like this, you paint it black, and you go to a sulfur. That's something God taught Moses on the mountain, because when he came down, he told the people, you shall tie it as a sign on your hand and a symbol between your eyes. The people said, well, what kind of sign are we going to put on our hands? What kind of symbol are we going to put between our eyes? Moses explained it to the people that it's. Then he said, you shall not cook a calf in its mother's milk. What is it? Does it apply only to a calf and a kid, or it's all milchiks and fleishiks? And you have to have fleishik dishes and milk dishes and all those things. So Moses came there. He broke it to them slowly. So Moses learned the whole Torah, and this is our tradition. They learned the whole Torah, the written and the oral, in the 40 days and 40 nights that he. But we know for a fact that a lot of the parts of the Torah that we know are stories that happened within the 40 years. So how did he learn the whole thing? So he was taught all the law, maybe not. So, but the portions of the Torah, as the tradition is that over the 40 years in the wilderness, Moses recorded the entire Torah and taught the people all the sections of the Torah. And then by the time, just before he passed away, they wrote the Torah down, and this is recorded in the Torah itself. It says that he told them to write 12 scrolls of the entire Torah, and to give every tribe one of them. And the 13th one will be placed in the Ark of the Covenant together with the tablets of the 10 Commandments. So what was in the Ark, in the Aron Kodesh, that the people traveled around? After by the end of the 40 years of the wilderness, they had the 10 Commandments. They also, the tradition is also the broken tablets. They had a little jar of the manna they were told to put inside as a symbol and a sign. And there was a Torah, a complete Torah scroll, as we have today in Shul, with the same 304,805 letters, with all the parchments and everything rolled into a scroll.
Wrote it in Hebrew?
Yeah. Yeah. The whole thing was written in Hebrew at the time. Now, there's questions about it. Was Ksav Ibis, Ksav Ashuris, about the actual letters, about what shape those letters had. It's a whole separate discussion. But what's important for us to know, and this is very important to know, is that by the time the 40 years in the wilderness finished, right, we had already the entire Torah with the traditions which were passed down from Moses at Sinai. That was given to the people. Now, we're going to look a little bit in some of the the pages I gave you. I'm going to show now. I'm going to share it online. So guys, get ready to let me know. Let me know if you can see it. Unmute yourself to let me know if you actually see the share screen. Okay. So I'm going to share the screen, guys, over here. Have a little patience over here. I'm going to do the share screen. There we go. Let's go, Zoe. Share. Okay. Can you guys see some screen over here or something? Huh?
Yes, it's on the side.
Okay, side. Okay, well, one thing at a time. So let's try to get this one over here. We're going to look at Avrohom, Masechta Avrohom. Okay, so we're on Masechta Avrohom. Okay, so I see that here. So let me see if I can change it around a little bit over here. We're getting there. Time to get this. Okay, now you can see something here, right? But I'm going a little higher. There we go. Okay. You guys can see, right?
That's
you see
beautiful.
it the right way?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is it very small or is it legible? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it. I'm going to see if I can make it a little larger. Yeah. Okay, we're going good now. Okay. There we go. Oh. There we go. Okay. You see the Talmud? There's a page of the Talmud here. This is This is Masechta Avrohom. You got it there, and you see it 4b. Right? Okay. So welcome someone here, Marilyn. Welcome. Okay. So our rabbis learned. You see that? I mean, you can see it in the Hebrew if you want to look at the Hebrew side. Tanur Rabban. It's underlined actually in the piece of Talmud. You're not looking at the right page. It's not the front one. It's the second one. Second page. Okay. See the second one where it says our rabbis learned in the box.
Oh yeah. Our rabbis learned. What was the procedure?
Okay, very good. Okay, so if you want to read the Hebrew of it, you'll see it the opposite side. Tanur Rabban. You see our rabbis learned, yeah. So if you want to look at the Hebrew on the opposite, on the side, on the facing side, you can see the Tanur Rabbanan. You guys can see it, yeah? Is it blocked by the pictures? I'm not sure. But anyways, so let's read it in the English a little bit for now. Later, in a couple of weeks from now, you guys will be all experts in Talmud. So by then, you'll be able to read the Aramaic all by yourself. You can be sure you'll be. Yeah. So let's learn like this. So he tells us how the Torah was learned. This is a piece of the Talmud. It was Masechta Avrohom. Masechta Avrohom is one of the earlier tractates. Tractate Avrohom 4b. Okay. Here we go. Our rabbis learned. What was the procedure of the instruction and the oral law? So a lot of the different things about the oral law itself is in the Talmud itself, right? So you see the question. What was the procedure in the oral law? Okay, I'm just going to do this over here. In a second. Okay. So he says like this. Oh, what did I just do here? Okay, no, we're good. Moses learned from the mouth of the omnipotent. Anyone know who the omnipotent is?
Sure.
Omnipotent, yeah, God. Omnipotent means he's all powerful, right? So Moses learned from the Almighty God, right? So that's the way it would work. So Moses would learn a section from Hashem. And this is like throughout the 40 years in the wilderness, Moses would go into the tent, into the Ohel Moed, and it says he would speak to God. He would speak to him through between the two cherubs. The voice of God would come to Moses and teach him whatever it was. So Moses would learn it he wouldn't go in the Holy of Holies, but he would stand in the regular area in the temple, and he would hear the voice coming out from there. So that's the way it was. Then Aaron entered, and Moses taught him the lesson. Okay, now you got it there. Right? Then he would go to Moses. Aaron would go to Moses. Aaron was a Kohen. He'd go in there, right? And he was a smart guy too. So he went in, and Moses taught him the entire lesson that he got from God. This is the way that the school worked. The school of learning the Torah, the 40 years of the wilderness, right? Besides what Moses learned in capsule form in the 40 days and the 40 nights when he was on the mountain. But then he learned throughout the 40 years, and he wrote the different portions, the sections of the Torah. As we know it, he would teach it to Aaron first. Aaron then moved aside and sat down on Moses' left. Thereupon, Aaron's sons entered, and Moses taught them their lesson. Okay, so Aaron sits down now on Moses' side, and there's Moses, there's Aaron, and now the sons of Aaron come in, and then Moses gives he repeats the same lesson a second time. Right? He hears it from God, he teaches it to Aaron, then he teaches it to the sons of Aaron. Okay, his sons then moved aside. Elazar taking his seat on Moses' right, and Itamar on Aaron's left. Okay, don't forget Aaron was already there. He's already there on the left, but probably on his side. Rabbi Huda stated, Aaron was always on Moses' right. We could talk about that later. Thereupon, the elders entered. Okay, we had the 70 elders. So they all entered, and Moses taught them their lesson. Okay, so the 70 elders, first Aaron hears it, the children of Aaron hear it, and then in that order, then Moses again repeats for a third time the same lesson to the elders. And when the elders moved aside, all the people entered. And Moses taught them their lesson. I guess it must have been like out in the courtyard or whatever this whole thing was going on. It doesn't say where this was going on, right? It thus followed that Aaron heard the lesson. How many times did Aaron hear it? He heard it 4 times. Because he heard the first time Moses told him privately, and then the second time when he taught it to the children, the third time when he taught it to the elders, the 4th time when he taught it to the people. And then his sons heard 3 times. The sons heard the lesson 3 times. They heard it one time when they heard it from Moses, then they heard it another time from when he told it to the elders, another time when he told it to the people of Israel. Sounds like Haggadah Shel Pesach, right? Okay. Just one second. Just let me finish this piece. Keep the question for a second, because I'm not very good at remembering all these things. Okay, just hold on. Then the elders heard it twice. They heard twice the whole thing, because they heard it one time when Moses taught it to them, and another time when he taught it to the people. And all the people heard it once. So it says at this stage, Moses departed, and Aaron taught them his lesson. Okay, so Moses then goes out, and then Aaron says over what he heard from Moses, which they all heard already too. But Aaron says it one time, then Aaron. Let's continue over here to the next page. Give me a second over here. Okay, then Aaron departed. Yeah, you see on top of the page. And his sons taught them the lesson, right? Aaron goes out, sons they left. His sons then departed, and the elders taught them the lesson. It thus follows that everybody heard the lesson 4 times. Yeah, from here, Rabbi Elazar inferred it's a duty, man's duty to teach his pupil his lesson 4 times. But this has arrived at Aaron, who learned from Moses, who had it from the omnipotent, had to learn his lesson 4 times. How much more an ordinary pupil? Aaron must have been a genius, right? Aaron HaKohen. But see, he still had to hear it 4 times. So for sure, this is a 40 Ori. For sure, simple people should learn at least anything 4 times. And people today, people were so used to, we're in the era of Wikipedia and all this, internet. We don't review things. So we don't have anything in our head really. Today, all we have is the ability to look up things. You know what I mean? We look up things. But in the olden days, people had like the Talmud. Well, they knew the Talmud by heart. I remember there was a rabbi in Montreal that I knew. I had the honor of knowing. He was known as the chief rabbi of Canada. He's probably the last chief rabbi there ever was. Met him? He went to Flamingo. Was he here?
I did meet him.
I
remember him.
Yeah. So the rabbi's name was Rabbi Hirschsprung. I'm talking about 30 years ago. He passed away already. So I don't think you're talking about the same person. So he was known as Rabbi Hirschsprung, and he was from the famous yeshiva that was in Poland. It was known Chachmei Lublin. Those that went on our trip, we stopped in Lublin. We stopped in that. The yeshiva is still there. You can go see it today. But in that yeshiva, the smallest student knew the whole Talmud by heart. But this guy, when I say he knew the Talmud by heart, I mean, you're talking about Talmud is like 3,000 pages, 2 sides, so 6,000 pages, but not only did he know the Talmud, but he knew the Rashi and the Tosfos, the commentaries, and he knew all the commentaries in the back. The olden days in the yeshiva, they had a thing called the pin test. A pin test was you take a pin and put it through pages of the Talmud, and you'd say, what's on page 73 at that point in the Talmud, right under this pin. So that was the pin test. I'm just saying how many times people reviewed things over and over again until they knew it like it was like a picture in their head. It was, even though you didn't have a photographic mind. So this guy, Hirschman, I remember he photographic mind. Right? So we heard about it. So we didn't know. So as kids in camp, I remember he was there in our camp in upstate New York. It's Rabbi Hirschman. And he says, pull out any book of the Talmud. So he pulled out a random book from the bookshelf, right? And we opened it up, an old book. We opened it up, and he said, start reading. And we just started reading like a line, and he just started continuing the rest of the page. Like he was like a very a funny guy because he got so excited, He started reading it, just continued the whole page. And then we said, okay, the regular page of the Talmud. We're going to go like the back, the commentaries that nobody even knows in the back. And we started reading that too. And he started continuing that too. That's some commentary, obscure commentary in the back of the book. Anyways, this is the way people knew things by heart. But you see over here, just the very beginning, from the very start of learning that started over here, it's an important thing. Moses taught the Torah. He knew there was going to be broken telephone. That's you ought to anticipate that, right? But what did he do? Every lesson that he gave, 4 times, so that every Jew that wanted to hear, and his student would be able to hear it. So what we have over here is an interesting thing. This is sort of a proof that what we have, it wasn't just like somebody passing down like one Zaidi to someone else. We were talking about a whole nation that came. There's a whole process about how everybody got to hear it 4 times. So you get it pretty right after so many people hear it. And so if somebody didn't remember, it reminds me the olden days we used to have by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, by the Fabrengens, he used to speak on Shabbos afternoon. We used to go at 1:30 after lunch. And then most people didn't even eat lunch by then. At 1:30, he'd start speaking like about 5:30, 6:30. I remember I used to be there. But it was Shabbos by day. So you couldn't record it. And you couldn't. How did we know that Rebbe said? So at night, after Shabbos was over, you had all the guys with the good heads. They all sat down. Everybody said, "What do you remember?" And there's some people that have photographic minds, and they remembered almost word for word what the Rebbe said, because if somebody said something that was wrong, the other one said, "No, he said that, he said that." And by the time they finished, they came to the exact, that's just a few hundred people by the Rebbe's Fabrengen, or Shabbos. But here you're talking about tens of thousands of people that all had, and they all learned the lesson. This is important. It's an important concept for the veracity of the authenticity of the Jewish oral tradition. So even though it was oral, a lot of it, but it was the word of God, which was passed down, and it was very, very clear. So what happened? They learned a lot over the 40 years in the wilderness. They had the written Torah was written, transcribed in the 5 books of Moses, which we know today as the Greek called the Pentateuch. Pentateuch. You ever heard the word the Pentateuch? Penta is 5. Tuch is, I don't know what tuch is. Pentateuch. Pentateuch is the 5 books of Moses, right? So you have Genesis, is Bereshis, and Exodus is the book of Shemot, and Vayikra is Leviticus, and Bamidbar is Numbers, and Deuteronomy is Dvar.
Repetition.
Yeah, it's repetition, right. It's called review, and with a lot of new things also. Even it's called repetition, a lot of new things. So we have the 5. You asking a question before? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, they talk about Aaron's sons learning, and they talk about the elders happened to Moses.
You know what? It's brought down actually in the Torah, in the Gemara. It says, "Why do we see that the children of great people are not so great?" Whatever. Moses' kids never really just. There are descendants of Moses' kids and everything. It could be like Jethro, who was a priest. He had some influence on them. I don't know. I'm not really sure. He was the Zayda. Sephora, yeah, it's far. That's why it's was. They were Cushim. Not Midianites. Yeah, not Cushim, but they were like darker a bit. Africans. There was no follow-up to his children. To his greatness, but they did. There are children of Moses within the Jewish community that show up, right? So we don't know a lot about what happened to them. But there is such a concept. The Gemara says that many times we see that children of great people are not necessarily so great. And sometimes we find the opposite. It's people who are not so great, and they said the reason is to teach us the Torah is not an inheritance. The Torah is something you have to work on. It's not just because your father was, or whatever, that's not what counts.
But the Kohanut is inheritance.
Yeah. I'm not saying there is no such thing as inheritance, but wisdom is lav dafka, something which is. So this is what we have over here. So we have developing at the very, very beginning, at the very start. Moses is taught the whole Torah by the omnipotent, by God. And he's taught that, like I say, in a capsule form, in the 40 days, 40 nights, and then in the full form, it's relayed over a period of 40 years while they're in the wilderness, and in a way that explains why, nobody was working, everybody was studying. What were they doing? Right? So it was a good time. They were all like in a kollel in Israel, like yeshiva, and they ate manna from heaven. So they were busy learning. That's what it was. They were developing the beginning of the Jewish wisdom. So we have 40 for 40 years, but there is a distinct difference that's made between what's known as the written law and the oral tradition. So the written law, the main thing is the word. Every word, every letter is written. And the oral tradition, the oral is more the idea that counts more than the words, the actual words, right? So the written law was passed down exactly as it was given by God in the 5 books of Moses and the Torah scroll. And if one letter is missing in the Torah whole Torah is not kosher. But then we had simultaneously, there was an oral tradition which was passed down from parent to child, and it was not allowed to be recorded. Why? So let's look at the next page over here, and we'll see a little bit more about the history of the oral tradition. And obviously we know that we said the Talmud, a lot of what the Talmud is the oral tradition, right? So obviously the oral tradition was recorded at some point, right? Because that's why we have the Mishnah, we have the Gemara, and that was recorded at a later point. But the Mishnah and the Gemara only happens like 1,000 years after the Torah is given. So the Torah was given in the year 2448 on the Jewish calendar, and then we go on for about 1,000 years until Yehuda Hanasi records in the year 200 of the Common Era. He records for the first time the Mishnah. So it means the tradition was for all of the 400 years that they wandered in Israel until they built a temple, another 400 years of the first temple, a 70-year break in between the two temples, then another 400 years for the second temple. So we have altogether about a period of 1,300 years that Jews are studying all of this, but they're not writing it down. Okay, so they never recorded it. Because the tradition was within the Torah itself that to make a distinction between the written law, which has to be every word, every letter, and the oral tradition, which is more the ideas. So here we go. Look, let's look a little bit inside this piece of the Gemara. This is a Gemara from Masechta Tamura, 14b. Okay, the Talmud, 14b. Now, remember, next week we're going to look a little bit at the structure of the Talmudic page and understand who are all the players, who are all the commentaries, what's going on over here, why. So what we're looking at here, you see a page of the Talmud, right? But right beside it, on the other side, this is a translation that you're looking at, right? But on the right side of the page, you have the Hebrew, and the Gemara, the Talmud is in the middle of the page. And I'm going to tell you a little bit soon about what Mishnah is, what Gemara is, what Talmud is. I'm throwing a lot of words at you, and by the time today finishes, you should have a little bit of a clarity of what all these things are. Next week we'll know who all the players are. Okay, can you guys see the piece over here? Give me a thumbs up if you can see the place. And Rabbi Nachman, you see Rabbi Yehuda ben Nachman, the Maturgaman of Reish Lakish. You see that?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you guys. Okay. So Rav Nachman, the Maturgaman of Reish Lakish, gave the following as exposition. The verse says, write thou these words. And then says, for after the tenor of these words, that's teaching you that matters. Give me a second here. Thus teaching you the matters received as oral traditions, you are not permitted to recite for mining, and that written things, biblical passages, you are not permitted to recite from memory. So the Torah, written Torah, you always had to read. It was written, and you wasn't supposed to say a pasuk. You're not supposed to say by heart, even though we do say something like Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, things like that. But that's when it became those things became part of the davening. But generally speaking, Torah verses, you're supposed to look inside. Mm-hmm. And the Tana of the school of Rabbi Shmuel said, Scripture says, write thou these words, implying that these words you may write. Only these words are to be written. It's part of our tradition, but you may not write traditional laws. Yeah. The answer was given. Perhaps the case is different in regard to a new interpretation. Rabbi Yochanan Shlakish used to peruse the book of Agadah on Shabbos and explain their attitude on this matter. Scripture says, it's time for the Lord to work. They have made void thy law. Explaining this as follows: it is better that one letter of the Torah should be uprooted than the whole Torah should be forgotten. Okay, so what happened was that at a certain point in the history of the Jewish people, they invoked. There is a pasuk in the Torah that says, the pasuk says, it is time for the Lord to work. They have made void thy law. So that you look at the Hebrew. One second. This is a very, very famous thing. It says, so Eis Lasos Lashem, Eis Lasot Lashem Heferu Teresacha. In order to restore the law of God, Heferu Teresacha, they broke your laws. What does that mean? It seems like it's speaking about an overriding principle. Sometimes we find in Torah that you have to break one law to keep another law, right? So this was the law. The law over here that there was a consensus amongst the Jewish people. But it came up a point in time that even though Jewish tradition was always that you're not allowed to things which are written law, you're not supposed to say by heart, and that which is by heart, you're not supposed to commit to writing. But there came a time where it was realized that if we don't take all these traditions, all these things which were passed down from Moses at Sinai, Moses to Aaron, to Aaron's children and the elders, and etc., etc., it was felt that everything will be lost, especially after the temples were destroyed. This is when they started recording the laws of the tradition, when the Jews were being dispersed to all parts of the world, and the Jews were going now to Rome and to here, and they felt that if they don't, once and for all, commit all these traditions to writing, it will be lost forever. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbi Yehuda the prince, 1,300 years later after the Torah was given, I mean, you know, they had already great academies that were studying already for a few hundred years before that. This is already after the era of prophecy, etc. But they still didn't record it in writing. But Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi felt, he invoked this verse that says that the leaders of a generation have a right to break a law to protect the other laws. It's a little bit of a dangerous sort of thing, because you can start becoming very liberal with this sort of law, because you say and that the same law, many people they used in let's say in the conservative reform movement, they said, well, we should allow people to drive on Shabbos in order to save the Shabbos. That's the same idea, but that was not accepted universally amongst all the Jewish people. But there came a time where everybody accepted a principle that in order to save the law, to protect the law, to make sure that all the traditions are not lost, we are prepared to break the law of recording the oral tradition, changing it from oral to written. And so they started at that point an entire movement to record every law of the Torah. And that started with Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was the great leader of the Jewish people in that generation. And after that, he wrote the Mishnah, which was the first attempt to record the laws of the Torah. And then in the ensuing generations, that was the generations of the Gemara. Gemara is the super commentary on the Mishnah. And it was over the next 300-400 years that they recorded not just the laws, the Mishnah, but also all the reasoning behind it, and all the sharp explanations of all these laws which are recorded, and like every piece of Gemara asks, where does it come from? How do we know this? What's the source? What's the source for that? What are we talking about? And it's just a lot of logic in the Gemara and the Mishnah over the next couple of hundred years. But just the first step, we'll go a little bit more into some of these things. But the first step is to know that there was a major shift that happened in the year 200 ACE, after the Common Era, or AD, whatever you want to call it, right? That's when the shift changed from being a tradition-oriented religion to a textual Torah. Where everything was now being committed to writing. It's like you have a parent and they're getting old, and they're telling you all the beautiful stories, and you say to yourself when you say, "Well, tape it, write it down, somebody save it." But Zaidi says he doesn't want anybody to. He said clearly he doesn't want anybody taping him because he might say something wrong. You say, who do we care what Zaidi say? Zaidi would want that we should keep the traditions in the family all the years. So sometimes we have to break a small thing in order to protect a greater thing.
I read that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, when he wrote down the Mishnah,
right.
So he wrote it very tersely,
right,
that it really required for the great scholars to develop it, because again, it's like the oral tradition that Moshe got. Well, what does exactly mean?
What does it mean? Right. So there's a lot of it recorded. Like I said, a lot of the oral tradition and the laws of the oral tradition were all recorded in there in the Mishnah, but there still was a lot of space for for explanation more and more, and that came in the next couple of generations. But
how much would have in the turmoil of the temples being destroyed, of the exile, of living among Rome or whatever, how much do you think would have actually been lost to prompt them to start reporting? There must have been a lot that was lost.
Yeah, there are certain laws that it's recorded in the Talmud that we don't know, and we wait for Mashiach to come because we don't know the answer to this, right? Or like you say, maybe it's
They must have panicked to break one word.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, right. So if you continue a little bit further, so now I'm going to give you a little bit of just a picture, a roadmap of what happened in what happens in this halachic process. Now, the laws of the Torah and the development of all the laws of the Torah are really based on built-in principles in the written law as well. So, one thing I told you last week was that the rabbis, they don't have their own power. It's almost like the Constitution. The Constitution gives the power to the Supreme Court, right? So, in almost the same way, there is a divine power that was given to the rabbis, that when you don't know what to do, you go to them to resolve it. And what they will tell you will become my will. So the Torah in that way has like sort of a very dynamic thing about it. In fact, some places in the Torah, in the Gemara, it says that God Himself, so to speak, says, even though I disagree with what the rabbi said, but because I gave them the power, that's my Torah, that's my will. Even though I disagree in principle, I would never come up with that idea. But since I put it in the same way as we also have, there's a concept in the Torah called majority rule. That when you don't know what to do, you go according to what the majority says. So you go to the majority of the authorities, and sometimes the minority is a smarter guy than the majority, right? And maybe he might be even right. But since majority rules is the principle that's in the Torah says you shall always follow the majority. So halacha was developed based on these few principles, which are sort of built-in clauses. One clause was follow what the rabbis teach you and how they interpret it. Second clause, which is very, very important, is the concept of majority rule. So if you have some rabbis say like that and some rabbis say like that, so you go according to consensus. So a lot of what halacha is consensus building that was developed over the years in understanding and interpretation, and then that becomes the law. Okay, so let's give just a little bit of a look. I mean, I'm giving you some of the ideas, not all on one foot. We're going to take you down here to a little roadmap here. Okay, let's see what we can do to this over here. Here we have it a little backwards, sideways over here. The Torah here is sideways. So let me just take it over here. Here we go. Okay, here we go. The Torah. You see the top of the page. The Torah from Sinai. Okay, that's the little the Ten Commandments. You see that in the little picture on top of the clouds. Eliza, you could see it there. You see the picture? Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So we have the Torah from Sinai. This is where it all started from. Remember, I said Moses went up 40 days and 40 nights. He heard the word of God for the next 40 years. He records it in the 5 books of Moses. And then we have over there what's known as, if you look at the left side, there's something called here the Pentateuch. Okay, Torah, right? So you see that there? It's not so clear. But we also have, during the same time or just shortly thereafter, there are other books which were given to other prophetic people, like Joshua, Samuel, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, all these guys. They were all prophets. And that's another clause in the Torah. The Torah says, if somebody proves himself to be a prophet, and they claim that it comes from the word, they have the word of God, and they prove that they are authentic prophets, you will listen to what the prophets have to say. So there are the books of the 5 Pentateuch, of the 5 books of Moses, which is the main part of the Torah. But then there are other visions that are given to us through the prophets and through the holy writings. Holy writings is also called the Ketuvim. They were books written by divinely inspired people. So you have books like Ezra and Nehemiah, the book of Esther, the book of the book of Job, the book of Proverbs. From King Solomon, you have the Song of Songs, you have the book of Proverbs, you have the book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. These are from King Solomon, who was a prophetic guy, smart, prophetic. So his book, all these books are but most of the law is developed in the Pentateuch, in what was given to Moses at Sinai. Prophets and holy writings are mostly inspirational stuff, right? Which are the word of God as well, but inspirational mostly.
The judges fall into prophets. Yeah.
They're called judges, but they were prophetic leaders of the Jewish people at the time. The book of Judges was written by prophets. The book itself was written by, some say by Samuel, some say whatever, but that's who the books were. The books were written by prophetic people. Okay. Now, if you see right beneath it, you have Midrash. Midrash is are different things which later find their way a little bit into the Talmud and the Gemara. Midrash are many teachings of traditional teachings and interpretations of the inspirational parts of the Torah. So there's a lot of stories. You have stories of Abraham. So you have the Midrashic stories that were passed down also from generation to generation. That was an amendment. A lot of the parables of the Torah, a lot of the different sections which tell the people how to conduct themselves, etc., etc. And then we have, but the tradition is that the Midrash or the Midrashim were also passed down from Moses at Sinai. It also came back from Moses at Sinai. But the difference is, even the Midrash doesn't need necessarily to be taken literally. It was given for its metaphoric value.
So it's like Agadah.
Agadah, exactly. It's very similar to Agadah, which appears later in the Gemara, right? So Midrash is an earlier form of Agadah. A lot of the Midrash falls into the Gemara at a later point as well. But we have what's known as Medrash Rabbah, Medrash Tanchuma. These are different Midrashim that we have a tradition that they go back all the ways in Moses' Sinai. Likewise, the Zohar, which was the mystical part of Torah. And so we have a tradition that the teachings of the Zohar, which is the Jewish mysticism, also goes back all the ways from Moses at Sinai. That's why you see Zohar somehow coming in over there, even though the Zohar is recorded later by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who's just around the time of the Mishnah. But the Zohar is also like Midrash. It's spiritual interpretations of the verses of Torah. But a lot of mysticism involved in it. So in the Jewish tradition, every verse in the Torah has a mystical side to it as well. So there is what's known as paradise. Paradise is an abbreviation for Pirush, the simple interpretation of the Torah. Then there's Remez, there's the allusions that are in the Torah, and Gematrias and things like that. Then there's Drush. Drush is the homiletical parts of the Torah, like Midrash. And then there is Sod. Sod is the mysticism of the Torah. So it's 4 things: Pirush, Remez, Drush, Sod, paradise. It's known as paradise. Paradise of Torah. It's paradise. Those are the 4 aspects of Torah as it was given down to Moses at Sinai. But then, like we say, 1,300 years later, we have the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is the first attempt to take the entire oral tradition, the rabbinic institutions, the traditions of the extrapolations of the Torah, etc., etc. That's all brought in the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is like the book of Deuteronomy, which is known as Mishnah Torah, the final of the 5 books of Moses. That Moses does a review of all the laws of the Torah. So Rabbi Yehuda, the prince, takes the entire Torah and he creates sort of kind of an encyclopedia of the entire Torah, of every area of Torah knowledge, of Torah law. He creates six sections of the Mishnah. You see over here, you have underneath the Mishnah, it says there's seeds. Seeds is all the agricultural laws of the Torah. Season is all the time-related parts of the Torah, like holidays and Sabbath, etc. Right? Woman is called woman, but whatever. It's marital law. That's what woman is. It's all the marital laws, which includes tractates like marriage and the laws of the levirate, Yevamot, and Ketubah, which is the laws of Ksubas, huh? Yibum, right, all of that. That's all in the section of woman. And then you have the section of damages, which is tort law, Jewish tort law. Like what you do in the Beth Din, all the different laws of people damaging other people's objects and what the laws are. And then you have holy things, which is the laws mostly of sacrifices, and all the laws, all the book of Leviticus, as was brought down in the oral tradition, the oral code. Right? That's called holy things. And purities is the laws of the pure and the impure. Right? There's a lot of laws in the Torah and in Tazria, Mitzorah, and different sections where they speak about people are pure, the laws of mikveh, etc., etc. So those are the laws of purity and impurity, the laws of para aduma, the red heifer, and people being purified in the temple times, etc., etc. So those are the 6 sections of the So there's an abbreviation for it, which is the abbreviation won't make it any easier for you, but it's Zman Nakat. Zman Nakat. Zman is Zion is Raim. Then comes Moyed, which is Mem, and Nun is Nashim, and Nakat is Nezikin, damages. Kachim is holy things, and Tara. So Zman Nakat. Anyways, it's not important what the abbreviation is. It's just for people who know Hebrew, it's Aramaic. It's an abbreviation for them. So there are 6 sections of the Mishnah. So the entire, just like you have 5 books of Moses, right? But this is not based on just the 5 books of Moses. Was based more on events that occurred when the Jews were traveling the 40 years in the wilderness, and sprinkled with a lot of laws throughout it, right? This over here that works differently. It was the first encyclopedic attempt to bring all the laws of the Torah into one place, based on categories of law. So there's the agricultural, the seasonal, the marital, the tort law, sacrificial law, and purity laws. So that's the entire Torah. Right? If anybody has any questions, you're welcome to ask some questions here. But we're going to continue a little bit. I just want to get you a little bit more of the picture. So the picture continues. It continues to unfold. And then while the Mishnah is recorded, there is also a thing called Breita and Tosefta. There were other rabbis at the same time as Rabbi Yehuda, the prince, who also started recording different laws of the Torah. They suddenly show up in writing. Remember, there's no print then. Right, printing only comes way later, like years. I don't know when Gutenberg, who was the guy that invented the printing press, right? That's like when is that? 1400s, 1500s, whatever that is. But until then, everything is being written. It's like they have manuscripts. So it was manuscripts, all this stuff, right? And then we continue as it continues on. So you have Breita and Tosefta. The word Breita, it comes from the word outside of bar. Bar in Aramaic means outside of the canon. Outside the official canon was the Mishnah. That was the official book. Then the Breita was like outside of the so the Mishnah was recorded by Yehuda the prince, and Breita and Tosefta was written by Rabbi and Rabbi Oishia. Tosefta also comes the word addendums to the Mishnah. So there were other laws which were brought that they felt maybe it was left out from the Mishnah or just some different opinions. That's the Breita and the Tosefta. It was around the same time as it appears around the same time as the Mishnah. So it's around the Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi the Prince. His nephew is Rabbi Chia. So the Breita Tosefta came from his nephew. So it's around the same era. But then we move into the Jewish people are actually dispersed. They go to Babylon, and when they go to Babylon, the Jews are they don't have a lot. They're not very wealthy or anything, but they really get involved in Torah learning, and big academies of study sprout all across Babylonia at the time, and big yeshivas opened up, and the Jews are studying Torah, and what's developed at that time is known as Talmud Bavli, the Babylon Talmud, and Talmud Yerushalmi. That's the people that remained behind in Israel, the Jerusalem Talmud. Jerusalem Talmud was concluded 100 years before the Babylon Talmud was concluded. The Babylon Talmud, when we speak about Gemara Talmud, we speak about the Babylonian Talmud. So the Jews are now dispersed. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, he was still in Israel, even though it's after the destruction of the temple. We know that after the temple was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan Mazake was there at the time of the destruction of the temple, and Vespasian gave the Jews a area in Israel where they could stay on and study Torah. He said, "Ten li Yavna v'chachameha." Yavna and so they gave a whole area in Israel under the Roman Empire. They allowed for the Jews to have places where they studied Torah.
The big rabbis, say to the Caesar at that time.
That's what Rabbi Yechon Mazake. I just mentioned his name.
Okay.
So Rabbi Yechon Mazake said that give me the Yavna.
Yeah, but he got it because he told the Caesar, "You're going to be
the king.
Caesar,
Right.
the other guy's going to
die." Right. Exactly. He died. Yeah.
So he was so happy
with
it. So what do you want?
Right. He took over from Titus, I think.
Give me some real estate.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Huh?
Where was Yavne?
No, we went.
Right. Yeah. So the great rabbis, there were many great rabbis that were there after the destruction of the temple. It was still before Rabbi Yehuda the Prince. So you had like people like Rabbi Akiva and in the Galilee. They had over there. They had the great rabbis like Rabbi Akiva, and he was in the year 120. Mm-hmm. He died in the year 120 after the Common Era, right? So it's 50, 60 years, and then there was a revolution, then a Bar Kokhba in the year 120 or something. 130, 120.
What's the town of the K in the north of Israel?
Huh?
Town of the K. I'll find the name just now. That's really
that you saw all the rabbis were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mayor of that's in the Galilee, up in the Galilee. It's I'm not sure which town you're talking about with the K, but Bnei Brak. No, Bnei Brak.
That's right.
Bnei Brak, yeah, that's near Tel Aviv, right? But Bnei Brak was also a place where Rabbi Kiva was and all. They were there, but most of the sages were up in the Galilee at the time. Many Jews were there, and then there was the revolution of Bar Kokhba. The Jews thought they were going to get back Israel, and then the Romans decimated the whole, and then that was it. After that, most of the Jews either went to Babylon or whatever, on the rivers of Babylon, whatever. So this was a very, very because there was already a Jewish community already in Babylon from after the time of the destruction of the first temple. So the Jews went to Babylon, and so at the same time there was the Jerusalem Talmud. There still was some Jews that remained behind, and they completed the Jerusalem Talmud. Was written by Rabbi Yochanan. He's a big player in the Gemara in general, Rabbi Yochanan, and then there was Reb Ashi. He wrote the Babylonian Talmud.
Were they written in the same language?
So the Babylonian Talmud is written in Aramaic, and the Jerusalem Talmud is mostly like Hebrew. Yeah, it's more of a Hebrew style. Some similarities, but it's mostly there's a lot of Hebrew in the Jerusalem Talmud. But don't forget, the Jews were going a lot back and forth from Babylon, and so Aramaic became sort of the language of the time. So even the Jerusalem Talmud is pretty Aramaic. Yeah. You can't give it to an Israeli, and they won't. Israeli will open up, they won't read it. They won't understand the word. Yeah. So there you go. So what we have is, if you give a look in every page of the Gemara, page of the Talmud, you'll have the Mishnah. It's all based on the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda the Prince. You see that? And then you have the Talmud Bavli that comes from it. So you'll have a Mishnah and you have Gemara. Gemara is the interpretation and the extrapolation of the things of the Mishnah, which happened over the next couple of 100 years after the Bavli. So what is the Mishnah? What is the Gemara? And what is the Bavli? The Mishnah is the basic encyclopedic recording of the laws, and then you have the next couple of 100 years. There's all the explanations and the extrapolations and a lot of the Breitza and Tosefta. So the Gemara, the Talmud is really a combination of the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Gemara is the next few 100 years after the Mishnah, and so the Talmud. When we say Talmud, we mean Mishnah with the commentaries of the Gemara. So we'll look in the page. You'll get a little bit more of an idea of that. But by the time the Babylonian, the Jerusalem Talmud was completed, everything that had to be said about the 5 books of Moses was already, it's all there. It's all there. It's all written down. But there still are a lot of question marks. We do have within the Gemara and within the Mishnah, we have sometimes disagreements. Shammai says this, Hillel says that, and all that, and then the Jews wanted to know what to do. Who do we follow? Which opinion do we follow? So the next, after the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud is completed, so we have in the next few 100 years, okay, you have two groups. One which is the more commentary on the Gemara and to understand what the Gemara is saying, and then you have another group which is the codifiers. The codifiers are those which try to finalize a lot of the things which were left open-ended still in the Talmud. Like I said, there was a lot of question marks in the Talmud. So people wanted to know how to conduct themselves. So following the principles of majority rule, all the rabbis put together all the opinions of everybody, and based on that, the halachic process was defined. So a lot of halachicists came after the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. So here we go. Let's go down a little further. So if you look over there, Alphas, Rambam, and Rosh. They were the codifiers of the law. Alphas, Rambam. We all know Rambam. Rambam is Maimonides. So that's already like around. You remember we said so. Rambam is like about 800 years after the Mishnah. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and everything is like it's a lot of confusion going on because there's opinions and interpretations and explanations, and so there were the codifiers which came and tried to bring everything together. And the Rambam writes actually a book called Mishneh Torah. So remember, the word Mishneh Torah was by Moses, first Moses, the book of Deuteronomy, which he reviewed everything God said and tried to organize it in the last book of the 5 books of Moses. That was one Mishneh Torah. Then there's the Mishnah of Rabbi Yehuda the Nasi. And then after the whole years of the Gemara and the Talmud and Bavli or Shalmi and all of that, comes the codifiers, and one of them being the Rambam, who goes back to everything that's in the Mishnah, but he takes now everything that was developed over the years in the Gemara, and he puts it into probably the most organized encyclopedic book he called it also the Mishneh Torah. He called it a book called the Mishneh Torah, Yad HaChazaka. Again, he created 14 books compared to the original Mishnah, which was 6 books, right? It wasn't 6 books. It was 6 sections, and the Rambam divided into 14 sections. and he has a complete encyclopedia of the entire Torah. But what he also does is he codifies. Codifies means he takes all the laws that appear in the Gemara and the Talmud, and he tries to bring it to a final resolution based on a lot of the principles. And then what happens is you have not just one guy. The Rambam is one, and around the same area there's someone called Rabbi Asher. Rabbi Asher Rambam was in Spain, Morocco, and then he moved to Egypt. Alfas was in Spain and Morocco, and the Rosh was he was also at some point in Spain, but he was mostly in France. So you have the Ashkenaz and the Sephardic, you have all these different rabbis, but they all were the Rosh was a codifier in the back of the Gemara. He codified everything in the Gemara, and the Alphas does the same style also. They basically not like the Rambam just writes a book like from scratch. The Rambam said, just come to my book and you'll know what you have to do. Whereas the Alphas and the Rosh, they're basically commentaries on the Gemara. So they'll take a page of the Gemara and they'll say, halacha like Shammai, the halacha like this one, the halacha like that one. And they took the pages of the Gemara and they came to like resolves. And then we had, these are the three pillars of the halachic codifiers of the generation which we're talking about in the year 1900, 1000, 1100, around there. The Rambam place was 1100, 1200, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And then after that, we have the period of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is the code of Jewish law, which we know today. So what is the code of Jewish law? The code of Jewish law took all these codifiers and said, okay, let's go with majority rule. And what the Shulchan Aruch does, the Shulchan Aruch was written by Joseph Cairo, who lived around the place 1500 or so. And he moved to Tzvat. Right? And what he did was he took the Alphas, Rambam, and Rosh, and he said, let's do 2 out of 3. Now he was Sephardi. So usually he follows the majority of those 3 famous codifiers. And that's what he puts in as the law. Now it's interesting, 2 out of the 3 were Sephardic. So the Ashkenazic were not very happy with that. So there was another fellow in Krakow at the time, his name was the Ramoshe Isserlish, who was one of the greatest leaders of the Ashkenazic Jews at the time. He said, hold on, you're outvoting us over here. So he writes a gloss on the Shulchan Aruch, where he says that although this is what the Shulchan Aruch says, he's the man, Joseph Cairo, but Moshe Isserlish, the Ashkenazi writes, but Ashkenazic follow this way in the gloss. So they then hence you have the Shulchan Aruch, which now is the book which has all the laws in it, the consensus building of all the laws, with some even within that some disagreements between the Ashkenazic and the Sephardi. So even though mostly they agree, but there are some areas where there was some disagreement as to rice on Pesach and things like that, whatever, And there's many other cases of that. And he made a book called the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. Today, everybody quotes the Code of Jewish Law without end, right? It says it in Shulchan Aruch. This is the way you're supposed to do it, right? Shulchan Aruch became the authoritative book. And why was it so powerful? Because it was based on majority rule. And it was also based on being accepted by all of the Jewish people. And that's another very important thing. For something to be accepted as being Torah law and accepting majority rule, it has to be something which is spread amongst all the people, and everybody said, this is the book. So that's, that was accepted by all the rabbis of those generations. In the years 1500s or so, Shulchan Aruch became the way. And going on thereafter, everyone accepts the Shulchan Aruch as being the codifiers. But remember, Shulchan Aruch comes from Alphas Rambam Rosh, which comes from Talmud Bavli, which comes from Mishnah, which leads us all the way back to the 5 principles of 5 pillars which we spoke about yesterday, what the the oral tradition is all about. So I think I'm just trying to give you a little bit of a roadmap of how Jewish law was developed and where the Gemara and the Talmud falls into the whole picture. It's a lot of information, here, and you'll see after the Shulchan Aruch, you also have many. They have many Shulchan Aruchs, like different commentaries. Now, the Shulchan Aruch became like sort of the central book of consensus of the Jewish people. But again, it's based on majority rule, and because it's based on majority rule, there are caveats. There are caveats where sometimes, in extenuating circumstances, we will follow a minority opinion in extenuating circumstances. And so you can rely, So even though it was codified based on most of the opinions, but they didn't say that the minority opinion is nothing. Minority opinions were always recognized by the Jews as something important in extenuating circumstances. So that's why we have in the Code of Jewish Law, we have sometimes times of great loss or if there's extenuating circumstance, you can follow, you can do this. But if it's the word of God, like, what do you mean? God said this way. No, it's not. It's the word of God, but it's based on a consensus building that was built. And within the consensus building itself, there were sort of caveats, and there were situations where, and that's why you have rabbis to know where the legal loopholes exist. Then the real legal loopholes which were accepted by the Jewish people for the generations. So that's important to know. And then with after the era of the Shulchan Aruch came the responsa era where rabbis and communities were asked, how does this apply to the Shulchan Aruch, and how does this apply that? And then there is trying to understand modernity and how the laws of the Shulchan Aruch would apply. And that's the codifiers today. Now we'll call them codifiers. The halachic authorities today really, they base themselves all on the Shulchan Aruch, which bases themselves on the Gemara, which bases themselves. But mostly what's discussed in these books is, something like electricity. Like, hey, electricity is electricity, fire of the Torah, right? So, like, how do we apply the laws? We know what the Shulchan Aruch says about it starting a fire on Shabbos, but what would the Shulchan Aruch say about flicking on a switch or starting a current of electrical electrons or whatever? So I'm just saying these are, what is a microphone? What is this? I mean, how do we deal with in vitro fertilization and what all forms of contraception and different things that we have to see how they fit in with the laws of the Torah. So the Torah that Moses commanded us as inherited the congregation of Jacob. It came from Moses at Sinai. And then there is like the famous story. It all comes from Moses. Moses. Question is, if Moses would come into a shul today, would he recognize anything, or would he understand anything we're talking about here? That's a good question. It's all. Now let me just conclude with the famous story. We might actually learn it inside the Gemara, one of the classes. It's a story of Moses when he came up in the heavens. The 40 days, the 40 nights, he sees God is like writing. He's writing the Torah, and Hashem is sort of putting little crowns on the like in the Torah scroll. You have these little crowns that are to beautify the letters, on top of the letters. So Moses says, God, what are these crowns? So he says, these crowns is what Rabbi Akiva is going to teach in 1,000 years from now. He's going to teach such deep ideas of the Torah. That's why I'm putting these beautiful crowns on the letters to remind myself of the greatness of Rabbi Akiva. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, Rabbi Akiva, who is you? I have to see this. So God says, okay. And this is in the Gemara. Hashem sends Moshe Rabbeinu like in a time machine, and he sends him 1,000 years ahead. And Moses suddenly finds himself in the back of the academy of Rabbi Akiva in Israel, wherever he was, in Bnei Brak or in the Galilee. He's sitting over there in the back of the school, and they're learning Gemara, they're learning Talmud, they're learning, whatever, the Mishnah, whatever they're learning then, right? And Moshe Rabbeinu is sitting in the back seat, and he doesn't understand the word the rabbi is saying, like Rabbi Akiva is saying these things. He feels really bad. What's going on over here? Like I thought, So one of the students asks the Rabbi, where do you know this? Rabbi says, what do you mean where I know it? I know it from Moses. I know it from Moshe Rabbeinu. This is all passed down. But Moshe Rabbeinu says in the back seat, he says, oh, wow, that's great. That's me. Yay. Anyways, that's what the rabbi said. How do you know? It's halacha l'Moshe miSinai. This is the law that was given to Moses. Moshe, it's interesting. Mother says Moshe Rabbeinu himself didn't recognize it, but then afterwards he was comforted. It was given Moshe. So what does it mean? How does it work? What does it mean? Taka? It was given to Moshe's son. No. Moshe was given the seeds. Didn't see the whole plant and the whole. You know what I mean? Moshe Rabbeinu was given by God every potential for everything that was developed over the years. So, but with Moshe Rabbeinu, he received like the hard drive, whatever. He received like the essence of everything, and yeah, it was developed. But it was all there implicit in what God gave him. Hashem gave it to him in the words of the Torah. Was all these ideas that came. That's it. So it says whatever any great scholar over all the years will develop. We should know that's halacha l'Moshe Messiah. It's all Moshe. Because again, it's also, like I said, there's a lot of built-in clauses in the Torah, laws of the 13 principles of exposition of the Torah, the laws of the power of the rabbis, the power of the concept of consensus building. All those things together is what allows for the development of the Torah to a point that maybe Moshe didn't recognize it, but it was Moshe's Torah. Anyways, it's something to think about. Huh? Katzerin, yeah.
Talmudic town.
Yeah, Katzerin.
It was fascinating. Thank you. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
The Spanish.
That was in Spanish. Yeah, Spanish, French. That's Alpha's.
That's the Sephardic.
No, not true. Ashkenaz and Sfarad more or less come around the same time. It was the golden era of the Jews in Spain, but at the same time, there were Jews. There was already a Jewish community developing at the very same time, simultaneously. With huh?
They were
no, the reforms came way later. Yeah. What are you talking about?
the Ashkenazim.
No, but they have two sort of lines, Ashkenaz and Sfarad. You know, it's interesting that the biggest division amongst the Jews over the years is probably Sfarad, right? But the Ashkenaz means Germany. Sfarad means Spain, Spanish Inquisition, and the Germans, we know what they were, right? So the two biggest anti-Semitic beings represent.
Well, that's because they were like Jews.
In those areas, right. Sure, it's not Sfarad. Not true. I have to disagree with you on that. It's not true. The Jews. Many Jews, when the Jews went with the Romans, where were they taken to? They were taken to Rome, right? And then many of the Jews from there went to communities in the times of the Crusaders, right? That was way before the Spanish Inquisition, 1100s, right? There were major Jewish communities already in Germany then. Right, in Germany there was So there were already they were two branches branched out around the same time. So there was an Ashkenazic tradition and a Sephardic tradition, but I mean.
So how come Chabad, the English?
Yeah.
The prayer book is Sephardic.
Basically, it's the siddur that we follow at Chabad is based on the Nusach Hari, the Arizal.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Right. It's fine. Right. So when they brought the Arizal was a mystical teacher at the same time almost as the wrote Shulchan Aruch, Joseph Cairo, also in Sephardic. Yeah, they lived around the same time, the Shulchan Aruch and the development of the mystical movement of Kabbalah. So when the Hasidic movement started to flourish, they took the Siddur, the mystical movement started by he took the Siddur of the Arizal, because his was most tied in with the Jewish mysticism. So they brought it like to Poland and places where Hasidism took off, and there were like 70 versions of the Nusach Hari, right? And most of the Polish Jews, when they came here to Toronto, they also davened Nusach Hari. It wasn't called Nusach Hari; it was called Nusach Sfard. It wasn't Sephardic. They called it Sephardic because the Arizal and those guys that started the Kabbalah movement, many of them came from the Sephardic lands. So because it was so foreign, they called it not Ashkenaz, but they called it the Sephardic Nusach. But it was Arizal. It was the mystical Nusach. So over here in Toronto, most of the old shuls here had a daven of Nusach. It's very similar to the Chabad one. It's called Nusach Sfard. But it's not the Sephardic Jews. Yeah. That's the Archko makes one Sfard, one Ashkenaz, but the Sephard one is very similar to the Arizal one because it was all based on the mystical tradition of davening, and that all goes back to the Arizal. There were many different versions. The Alter Rebbe, when they started the Chabad Nusach Hari, was based on. He says the Alter Rebbe took out 70 Siddurim, 70 different versions of the Arizal, and he put together our Siddur. He said what he felt was the Alter Rebbe, the first Kabbalah, he felt this is most accurate to what the teachings of the Arizal was. So, but there were many others, and that was called Nusach Sfard, but it had nothing to do with Sephardic. It was called the Sephardic, compared to Ashkenaz Nusach, which was the fairly accepted time. The Sephardic Nusach was the Nusach which was based on Arizal. Mysticism, Jewish mysticism. And Hasidism was a Kabbalistic mystical movement. I think Rinat Yisrael is Ashkenaz. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's Ashkenaz. I think so. But there are many like Tikkun Meir. There are many Siddurim here that are Nusach Sfard. Not Sephardic. Yeah. Then there is the Nusach of the Sephardic Jews. That's a totally different thing. That's very different actually. Like the Kaddish, the Ari says V'yatzmu Pekone V'Kodem Mashiach, right? And the Sephardic Jews do that too. They say also they have over there Savak Panasa Kadlalaka. They say like a whole bunch of other. You know what I mean? They have all. Yeah, Yeshua, but it goes on. They have like a whole bunch in the Kaddish, a whole thing. That's the Sephardic music, and then they have then the Yemenites have a little bit of. Anyways, we're not talking about nusachs now. So, guys, thank you very much for coming to the class. And
thank you. It's fascinating.
Guys, next week we're going to look at a page of the Talmud, and we're going to break it down to understand how to learn a page, and the roadmap of the page of the Talmud. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. So when you want to show them
I should have done it. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Where's the
huh?
Where's your?
Can I get on?
Yeah.
And then I think if you pinch or if you
right.
there you go.
You taught me something then. I was just doing this. Huh? Take it. Yeah, it's all yours. Okay, guys. Everyone else okay over there online? Have a good night.
Good night.
Share and